吓死我了, that was scary, guys. I'm scared. Alright, welcome back, fellas. Today we're talking about two new mousepads. They're going to be the Soku X2 release in Akai and Shiro. So first of all, big shout out to Soku and REDGROOVE for sending these through to me. If you don't know what Soku is a newer startup. They're trying to build a community through gear and just everything else. The founders of Soku are retired ex-professional Rainbow Six players from Europe. So that's how you know that they are definitely involved in the community and they understand and love these things as much as we all do. And mousepads are currently their only release. This is the second drop, as I mentioned before. I do love what they're doing for the community. I've been sitting in the Discord, reading the chats, watching people interact with each other, and they really do try to make everyone feel inclusive. Whether or not you're interested in their gear, I recommend joining the community. It's just something nice to be part of. So the Akai and Shiro, meaning red and white in Nihongo, Japanese respectively, are the newest entries into the Soku mousepad line. The Akai is targeted to be a control pad, while the Shiro here is more of a hybrid pad that's supposed to be a little bit faster. On Max Gaming, they're a little bit expensive. They're 45 euros each, or 75 Australian dollars roughly. But on their website, it was only listed as 30 on discount, or 35 normally. Looks like it is a bit sold out. I think that was also excluding VAT. I'm not too sure how that would work. I think the VAT thing is a European special. So that price listed is going to be the flat price for those of us who are international buyers. Now, aesthetically, these pads look very nice. I'm sure you guys can tell from the recording or on the images, if you go look some Google images up, that these pads look super nice. They got that nice little cherry blossom all over it, the Soku kind of 3D image. And particularly the Akai looks even better due to its surface. Aside from the color being red, the surface itself seems somewhat a little bit reflective. Not in the sense that it's coated, it's just the nature of this material. But either way, the Akai looks really nice. Even nicer in person than it would be on your video. They do have the Shiro and Soku written up on the top for the white one, and the same can be said for the red one over there. Both of these are 480 x 400 x 4mm thick, so same size as the Lamzu Energon, but a little bit thicker. If you came for the quick summary that I always do for these videos, just to see if this is worth your time or not, I want to say I like the Akai more than the Shiro, even though the Shiro is closer to the speed that I prefer. Now, I genuinely do recommend these pads if you can find them for a decent price. I do think 45 euros on Max Gaming is a little bit expensive, considering there's pads like the Focus Ambition out there now that are the same price, and those use like Poron base and whatnot. I do think the Akai is a better mousepad than the Shiro, even though the Shiro is closer to the speed that I personally would prefer. Now, the Akai deserves a lot more attention than it probably will get, because I do hold this pad in the same tier almost as I would for the Lamzu Energon. So if you guys know how much I like the Lamzu Energon, you'll know that this is quite a feat to achieve. We'll talk more comparisons later on in the video. So surfaces do feel like OEM surfaces, generic surfaces, nothing too fancy. But this can also be a good thing because Soku isn't trying to make the newest, most innovative, fancy kind of mousepad to begin with, right? This is just the old reliable that you can definitely trust. Now, more detailed comparisons and everything else we'll talk about in a bit. So let's start with the base. The base of the mousepads are just a standard rubber base. It's nothing fancy like Poron, but it gets the job done. I've never had these pads move on my desk at all, and if anything, this thing is solidly heavy. Like, this is a lot heavier than I thought they would be. They're solid rubber, and that weight definitely contributes to having it stay on the desk. The pad is 4mm thick, and surprisingly, it is soft and plush. So I wasn't expecting this to come out of a generic rubber base like this. This might just be one of the best rubber bases I've ever tried. Now, given everyone is spoiled by Poron now, this isn't necessarily the most impressive thing, but nonetheless, using rubber base, they can create something nice, thick, soft, plush like this is really impressive to me. This is around just the kind of perfect level of softness I would like on my pads, and it's a huge reason of why I would say that these are actually good mouse pads and I hold them in high regard. Take the Lamzu for example. I said as much as I love the mouse pad, the base was probably the worst part about it. Now, stitching is good as well. It is really thick, nice stitching. There's no imperfections on any of my two units, and they look really durable. However, it isn't perfectly flat or below the edge, so if that is something that does bother you, you might want to note that you might feel the stitching on your arm when you rest your arm on the mousepad. Now, I didn't particularly feel that, but it's definitely something that is there to note. It isn't perfectly flat or under the surface level. So there is a little bit of a very, very minor bump on that. So we'll move on to the specifics, right? We'll start with the Akai specifics. I do like this pad more. The Akai is a control pad. It's definitely slower than the Shiro, but not by too much. I think in the grand scheme of all mouse pads on the market, this is like one of the slower mouse pads in that medium speed category, but on the slower end of those medium speed mouse pads. If you are a tac shooter only player, whether you play R6 or Valorant or CSGO or whatever, and you do like those slower control pads, then this is probably like a perfect speed for you. Fast-paced tracking game only players, you might want to look elsewhere for a bit of a smoother, faster mouse pad for that. The texture is smooth, right? The texture is really nice and smooth. You glide a mouse on it and you can't really feel anything underneath it. It works with an arm sleeve perfectly fine, and therefore it's just all around good. You know, I like this no texture kind of feel. It's not the most perfect silky smooth like the Lamzu was, but it's getting close to that. So here's a little quick glide test with my X2 that I've brought out for I don't know what reason. As you can see, my X2 is not gliding perfectly because the skates are worn out differently on the front and back, so I should probably change those soon. So moving on to the Shiro specifics. This is a hybrid pad. You can definitely feel that the surface is a little bit different. It's not as silky smooth as everything else. It's designed to be faster than the Akai, specifically so people who want to do tracking-based games can have a bit of a better time doing that. Realistically speaking, this mousepad is still just a medium-speed mousepad sitting right in the middle. Should work for all video games. Although if you want specifically faster or slower, then, you know, go find the speed that works for you. I think it's very well balanced in terms of that speed and control, and I just can't see how anyone would be unhappy with this. Texture is a little bit rougher than the Akai due to that unique stitching and the hybrid stitching, but it's still just a normal cloth pad. Neither of these are coated, so don't need to worry about that. It's not abrasive at all, right? When I say it's a bit rougher, it's because it is a little bit rougher when compared to the Akai. In no means is this a rough mousepad. Anything compared to the Lamzu Energon can be considered rough, right? I could say the Artisan Zero is rough, and you guys be like, what? That's not rough. But if you compare that to the Lamzu Energon, you'll see what I mean. So the overall glide, same thing, as you can see, is a lot faster than the Akai was. This should just be a pretty good mousepad to work with in that sense. This mousepad has one fatal flaw, which is why I prefer the Akai and why this kind of put me off from using it more than I did. And that is because it has issues with an arm sleeve. So I think the arm sleeve problem has put me off a lot of different mousepads, but if I'm going to always play with an arm sleeve, I'm always going to play with an arm sleeve. So in terms of what the problem is with an arm sleeve, well, when I have my arm on the mousepad, and I move it around, right? When I go in the horizontal direction like this, it is perfectly fine. The glide is perfect, the arm sleeve has no catching whatsoever, and this actually feels really, really good. The problem is, it has to do with the way this mousepad is weaved and the surface is designed, that there is a directional aspect in that. Not that there is a difference in XY speed that I could notice on my mouse, but more so on the arm sleeve itself, because that's fabric on fabric action. So horizontally works fine, but as soon as you go vertical, it just stops moving. As you can see, it's now like stuck, my arm's stuck, and you can hear that rough abrasion coming through to move it. Versus doing this, coming to here, and it just stops moving. If you are a really high sensitivity player, you might not have that issue, because all you're gonna do is move your arm like this, and within this range of motion, you will have no problems. But I'm a very low sense player, and I will go like this. So for the first part of moving my arm horizontally up to here, this is all good. But as soon as I want to curl any more beyond this 45-degree angle point from my elbow, it's just impossible to move anymore. So then that creates mega inconsistencies in when I try to do a swipe, because the first half of the swipe goes super fast and smooth, and suddenly it just chokes, right? And then this is really off-putting. So if you guys do use an arm sleeve, that is something to be aware of, because as soon as you go past that 45-degree angle and you're kind of in that vertical realm, it just does not move anymore. So who should buy these mouse pads? Well, first of all, you have to check if you have easy access to these products, because there is no way I'm going to recommend these to you guys if you're going to have to pay the same price as, say, an Artisan or a Lethal Gaming Gear mousepad for this to be shipped to you. Because at that point, it's just really not worth it. As much as I love Soku and these mousepads, that's not worth doing. If you can find these for a relatively decent price, then you should start considering these and putting them into your books. The other thing is, if you're not a person who's chasing every single last bit of performance, regardless of what the mousepad looks like, feels like, or whatever, you just want the thing that performs the single best, then you're going to have to go through every mousepad and find that for yourself. So whether that's in terms of ideal speed, size, arm sleeve problems, texture requirements, like whatever, if you aren't particularly fussed over everything, then you can pick one of these up and you'll be happy. right? There's no way that you'll pick one of these up and you're just unhappy about it. That's not going to happen. They're probably really good if you are a casual gamer or a person that doesn't really care about peripherals. You know, there's heaps of pro players out there that I know that still use a QCK as a mousepad or just whatever Logitech G640 because they don't care. Then, you know, you could look into these because they look so nice, right? I like these mousepads because they look nice. This aesthetic part really does sell to me, similar to how the Aqua controls look really nice to me as well, and I would recommend those. Enthusiasts and collectors that just want to try everything, you know, that's also worth looking at. You just buy one of these, especially because you can help support a genuinely good community. I think that is a big dub in that sense as well. And they're just very solid, reliable pads. In comparison to the big bad boy here in the Lamzu Energon, in terms of base, the base of the mousepad, the Energon gets clapped by both of these Soku pads. There is no doubt in my mind, there is no competition here whatsoever in terms of the base quality between the Soku and the Energon. The Energon gets absolutely shit on. The Soku rubber bases are so much better. The main reason I'm comparing Energon is just Energon seems like the best comparison mousepad for this as well. It's unfair to compare Poron against the rubber, so in terms of rubber on rubber action, the Soku is better. Also because the Soku has that nicer, thick, plush, padded feel, but the Lamzu here does not have that same kind of response. In terms of speed, Akai is definitely the slowest, and the speed difference between the Energon and the Shiro is almost negligible in my opinion. They felt almost the same to move my mouse around on. It really doesn't matter at that point. Texture-wise, the Energon is still by far the silky smooth one. The Akai comes really close, and the Shiro does fall short on that field. Now, stitching is thinner on the Energon and definitely not as noticeable. So if that is something of concern to you, then the Energon is better for that. However, I will say that the Akai and Shiro have more durable stitching. The Lamzu stitching is definitely better for performance, but not as durable as those. And lastly, the Energon works with an arm sleeve. The Soku Akai works with arm sleeve, but the Shiro here, unfortunately, does not. In summary, congratulations to Soku, congratulations to you REDGROOVE and all the others out there for creating two very successful mousepads. For you purchasers out there, do not expect this to blow you away like your first ever artisan mousepad did, or other Poron pads or whatnot, or the Energon with its unique surface for that matter. But while it's not one of those, or not the best in any particular field, I think it checks most boxes as an all-rounder for everyone out there. You know, it's got good aesthetic, good base, good speed, good control, good texture, stitching. There's very solid pads. Yeah, that's pretty much the end of the review. Do I recommend these? If they're not priced absurdly for you to get them, depending on your geographic location, then by all means, pick up one of these and give it a go.